Zach is back. It's the Zach Gelb Show on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey.
Welcome back in, 4:16 on this Tuesday. Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920 The Jersey, 609-919-9200. Sometimes in our society, we overuse the word expert. I'm not going to overuse it here because that's an accurate statement. Tim Brando is an expert in all thing college sports, and he does a great job for Fox Sports, and Tim Brando joins us right now. Tim, Zach Gelb, appreciate a few minutes, and how are you?
I'm great, Zach. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for coming on, and I always appreciate when I talk to you. So here locally, we have a lot of excited Penn State fans and a lot of excited Temple fans. They'll both have their conference championship games this upcoming weekend. The big thing, though, that I'm curious tonight, though, what do you think's going to be the top four when the college football playoff poll is released, Tim?
Oh, I wouldn't put too much stock in what you see tonight. We saw 2 years ago TCU in the number 3 position, and they dropped all the way to 6 in the final one after Ohio State buried Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship. So I've said for a long time it may make good TV, and they have a lot of inventory at ESPN that they need to take care of and try and promote the college football playoff. But this will be a cookie-cutter top 4. You won't see anything but chalk. 1 will be Bama, 2 will be Ohio State, 3 will be Clemson, 4 will be Washington, and that's a nice holiday gift bag wrapped up with a bow. But it could go to hell and back with just a couple of upsets championship Saturday, and I think there's a very good chance of that happening, both in the ACC title game as well as the Pac-12 title game. Then the committee's got a real problem, a problem unlike they've ever seen since they went to this format 3 years ago, whereby they're going to have non-champions represented in the Final Four. Ohio State is a given. I don't see any way they can keep them out under any circumstances. And if either Virginia Tech beats Clemson or Colorado beats Washington, you're going to be staring right down the throat at Penn State if they happen to win against Wisconsin in the Big Ten title game, because they won the very division, and they beat a team that's already going to be in head-to-head within their division, Ohio State. So that means 2 teams from the same conference getting in. That will wreak havoc across the board with all of the other college football playoff Power 5 conferences, and there will even be a threat of a third team getting in if both of those championship games bring upsets. With Virginia Tech and Colorado both winning, now you've got real issues, because there's going to be a long deliberation over whether Michigan actually deserves to get in because they beat Colorado head-to-head, and that would be one of your conference champions. And the Big 12 championship is not a lightweight by any stretch. I mean, Oklahoma and Oklahoma State's winner, provided it's the Cowboys, that's a road team playing in a conference championship game. That's not a neutral site game. That's Bedlam. That's a rivalry game. And Oklahoma State would have won 8 in a row, including a loss that should not have been and that they have not had to deal with. So you'd have a champion really out of the Big 12 with 1 loss rather than 2. That Central Michigan game should not have been a loss, and they're going to have to address that if the Cowboys happen to win. And so it's going to be screwy no matter what, and the committee is going to have a really hard time. And ultimately, my prediction will be, because we're 3 years into this thing and they have a chance to review it, if more than 1 team from any conference gets in, we're going to see an expansion of this playoff to 6 teams immediately, just as we did after the godforsaken BCS ended with that debacle of a rematch between LSU and Alabama in 2011. You saw how quickly they changed things because it was a disaster, and other conferences, especially the Big 12, were upset because Oklahoma State lost 1 game after a plane crash on a Thursday night on the road, a plane crash involving their women's basketball team, and it was an emotional time for them, and the committee still went with Alabama. If that team had been Oklahoma, a bigger brand name, I contend that that Alabama rematch for LSU would never have happened. We wouldn't be in the playoff position that we're in right now. So this thing will change as fast as you can say renegotiate if 2 or more teams from the Big Ten gets in.
See, that's interesting because we had Chris Fowler on, and I asked him, how far do you think we are away from expansion? And he said he thought it would be a very long time. Just regardless of that,
with all due respect to my friend Chris
Sure.
Fowler, whom I have the utmost respect for, and we started together. And in fact, College Game Day in 1987 was mine in the beginning, and he was elevated to the position of host of College Game Day after I had left for 1 year to call games for ESPN. Bill Hancock, go back and read some of the quotes. I would advise both you and Chris to go look at some of the quotes anti-playoff at all. 3 years ago, roughly 10 months before the playoff was put in place by Bill Hancock. And the fact that Ari Fleischer was hired and his firm was hired to put on a website that was anti-playoff for the BCS. All those quotes, all of them, are debunked because we have a playoff now. And, he's got to toe the company line. I understand that with Chris. But the facts of the matter are these are 5 conferences that have business dealings and budgets that are far, far apart. The Big Ten is making twice as much money as the Pac-12. The SEC is making a third more money than the ACC and the Big 12. And if you load and stock up the coffers of the Big Ten to the extent that we're talking about, I'm telling you, there will be changes in smoke-filled rooms, regardless of what Chris or Bill Hancock or anybody feels. This is a consortium between conferences, and it's about business, and it's about money, and it's about equity. And there are going to be issues if more than one team out of a conference gets in to the college football playoff. And I mean this year.
Tim Brando with us right now on the Zach Gelb Show. I actually agree. I think there should be expansion in this playoff. I wholeheartedly do think that should be the route. Let me ask you this, though, because you mentioned upsets in the beginning. Let's just say if there's not upsets, and let's just say, Alabama's in, Ohio State's in. If Clemson wins, they're going to be in. If it comes down to Washington winning and then the winner of the Big Ten championship game, does the committee go Big Ten again, or do they go Washington?
I think there's a better chance of that happening, Zach, if Wisconsin wins. If Wisconsin wins, then I think that the Big Ten is going to be out of that second chance opportunity. If Penn State happens to win, they've got a little bit of a dilemma on their hands because Washington's non-conference schedule was garbage, and they can take a look at that. The committee's big on this. The blueprint of the college basketball tournament, the NCAA tournament selection committee, they use the same blueprint in terms of weighting what teams do with the games that they control, meaning the non-conference decision-making. It's one of the reasons I believe that Ohio State can't be touched. Ohio State can't be touched, even though they're not going to be a conference champion, because of going on the road and beating Oklahoma soundly in Norman. That's a game that they control. They could have gone and played someplace else. That's important. So I don't see Ohio State not playing in the Big Ten title game as a real problem for them at all because of what they did in their non-conference. Washington's non-conference is about as bad as maybe Baylor's and TCU's was 3 years ago, and it was one of the excuses given by Jeff Long, the director of the playoff, if you recall that year, for why Ohio State leapfrogged them when they thrashed Wisconsin 59-0 in the Big Ten title game. Wisconsin is a safer victory for the other conferences because they don't have that direct head-to-head win over Ohio State. Penn State does. So if it happens to be Penn State, I think they'll deliberate a lot longer over Washington and Penn State than they would over Wisconsin and Washington. If Wisconsin's the team, I think Washington's going to be solid.
When you break down that game, Wisconsin-Penn State, what do you think decides it?
I think ultimately it's going to be the play of McSorley at quarterback. He's shown, I think, neither of those quarterbacks are of the same ilk as, say, a Browning would be at Washington or a Watson or a Baker Mayfield even at Oklahoma. There's better quarterback play elsewhere than in that matchup, no question. But I've seen some signs from McSorley that he's making some big plays now, especially when flushed from the pocket. And Penn State has just been magnificent defensively and in special teams. And I think that right now I give them a slight edge in the game, and it's the reason I'm picking them to win.
You talk about special teams. That whole season was turned around, that game against Ohio State, and there were some rumors that Franklin, this may be his last year there, and now they're giving him many words of extolment. Just how about that turnaround and that play that really changed this entire Penn State season?
Well, it is amazing what he's done, and short of McIntyre at Colorado, I think he's got to be the first vote that I would make for Coach of the Year. You know, Franklin's got to be right after him, and I got to know him well at Vanderbilt, and I know how much this means to him, especially since people were beginning to doubt him in State College. And given everything that's happened in the recent history of Penn State University, it's pretty exciting for those fans and for him, I think, being a guy that's not far from that part of the country, a guy that kind of grew up in the Philly area, thinking about being a coach one day at a school of prominence along the Eastern Seaboard and in the Big Ten, particularly. I probably didn't think that Penn State would be a Big Ten job when he was growing up, as it turned out to be. But I would vote him right now number 2 behind McIntyre. He turned his team from Colorado from 1-8 in the league to 8-1. I think that's enormous what he was able to do in his 4th year. So. It's fantastic to see the kind of turnaround and a feel-good, really. It's a great feel-good story what's going on in Happy Valley.
You mentioned what happened in the past, and we all know what occurred was just some despicable and just disgusting actions. No one here is really debating that, but that university has had problems distancing themselves from that Paterno past, and there's been a lot of debates. They honored him this year and that team before the Temple game earlier this season. How do you think that storyline gets covered this weekend, how Penn State's coming back, but you still have to acknowledge about what happened in the past, right?
I think in a lot of ways, guys in my end of the business, the guys that are covering the game, the remote approach to broadcasting, we've kind of been there, done that.
Okay.
And Penn State's white crews and black shoes and the whole look is still the same, which I find refreshing with all of the Under Armour and Nike challenges and uniforms that we see from week to week. That causes, at least for guys my age, a little bit of a problem in looking at a television screen and knowing exactly who's playing in the game. I thought those Ohio State helmets, by the way, were awful. But I go back to, tradition is the currency of college football. It remains the currency. Penn State does have tradition. That is an ugly blemish, that period, no doubt about it. But these young men and the coaching staff that's with Franklin, they had nothing to do with that. This is their moment to shine, and I think that in today's world, particularly those of us out there doing the game, calling the game over a 4.5 hour period, we need to embrace and celebrate what's good that's going on at this time of year. There'll be some columns, I'm sure, written about it. Guys that are in the business of getting hits on websites, if not selling papers, they're going to write some stories about it, I'm sure. But I think by and large, we're past that now. At least I'd like to think so.
Now, I'd be curious to see how some of those former Paterno players handle themselves. Let's say if Penn State does win this weekend. That's what I'd be curious to see what some of those Instagram and Twitter posts would be.
I'd highly recommend to Jay Paterno to stay quiet.
Yeah, I agree. He should have done that a few months ago.
Yeah, indeed.
Tim Brando with us right now. Tim, okay, so another big storyline locally, Navy Temple down in Annapolis this weekend. Central Michigan plays Ohio the night before. If Central Michigan wins, does Navy or Temple, the winner of that, have an argument to get to the Cotton Bowl?
Yeah, I do. I don't think there's any question about that. Those two teams have been very, very good through the course of the year. And by the way, you start talking about influential wins that Penn State had during the course of the year. Temple's one of them. Okay, and if I'm talking about Navy, my gosh, I couldn't believe what I saw through the course of this year with what they were able to do, and I certainly understand why the coach elected to stay. I mean, it was just unbelievable to see that team continue with a change at the mission-critical position to be as effective as they were. Yeah, I could see a Cotton Bowl, particularly Navy, if that were to happen. They've been off the charts this season, no question about it.
You bring up a good point with Niumatalolo, because both of those places, Temple and Navy, very unique, and both of those coaches paid their dues at those respective places before they were named the head coach. How much tougher does that make it to leave for both of those coaches?
Yeah, I think for Niumatalolo, the thing that jumps out, because I've talked to him many times in my years at CBS, we always had the Army-Navy game. Sometimes I'd actually go with Spencer, and we'd do the pregame show from the location. That whole Apocalypse Now pregame thing that takes place with the choppers coming in overhead. It's just an amazing thing to see. He is moved emotionally because of his past and growing up not far from Pearl Harbor, and his roots in Hawaii, I think, have a lot to do with that emotionally. And he's now gotten so accustomed to coaching guys that are the best of the lot. I mean, that really is. I mean, when you start talking about Navy and Army, West Point and Annapolis, we're talking about America's finest, period. And I was told a long time ago by the old Air Force coach, Fisher DeBerry, that one of the reasons he never left, and he was offered many jobs, he's from South Carolina, and that job and the Clemson job both came open during the time that he was doing very well at Air Force in the 80s and early 90s. He said, why would I want to coach when someplace where the players don't look at practice as fun? I mean, when I'm coaching at Air Force or the military academy, you know, the only thing better than a furlough is practice. These guys are jumping for joy when they come to practice because everything else they do is so difficult in their workday. And there's a lot of truth to that. I think Ken Niumatalolo wisely stayed where he was because he became so comfortable coaching America's finest. And good for him, good for Navy. Says a lot, too, I think, about what that institution did, and Army's still trying to catch up. What Navy did to become current with regard to facilities and financial investment back into their program is something West Point is still trying to catch up to, and it's why Navy has been dominating that series. And the move to the conference was huge for them, too. Made a lot of sense. And I think while 10 of the American Athletic Conference schools were thinking about the charade that was the Big 12 expansion this past year, Navy wasn't. They were only thinking about where they were and how happy they were to be there. And that says a lot, too, about the stability of the program as well as Ken Niumatalolo.
Temple, third total defense in the country. Navy, that offense just so explosive with the triple option. Worth has been sensational after seeing their starting quarterback go down in the beginning of the year. Heck, I was reading over the weekend, Navy scored more points than their basketball team, the 75 spot that they put up. So Navy's offense, Temple's defense, buckle up. How do you see this one playing out?
I think Navy's got just too much speed on the edge with the triple option. It's not so much just the triple option; it's the people that are running it. And try as you might, and I know Temple's defense has been stout. This is a different kind of thing. I mean, these guys are blocking you from different angles. I know some critics would say, "Well, they chop block." No, they don't. They block on angles that you're just not accustomed to. And then you look at the talent ensemble that they put in that backfield, and I mean, it's just amazing. I think not only will Navy win that game, I think they'll go into a New Year's Six bowl, or if not a New Year's Six bowl, certainly a Great Bowl, and knock off whoever they play. Because you never have to worry about those guys being up for a bowl game. A lot of schools, coaches are always wondering during the holidays, are my guys ready? Well, at Navy, they're always ready.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And just saying, as a Temple alum, I hope the Owls do win this upcoming Saturday. Just throwing that out there.
I wish I could paint a better story for you. Look, he's done a great job.
More impressive this year than last year, to me.
And by the way, speaking of that, I know a number of the people have come up to Philadelphia many times to do some Villanova games, and actually met some board members with Temple. That actually love college basketball and are even friends with Jay Wright, and we talked at length about, the investment that they made into Temple football, and you're to be congratulated. You should be a proud alum.
Oh, I
really
am.
should.
Trust me. But when I was a freshman at Temple, you couldn't even recognize the football players, and that wasn't that long ago. It was only 4 or 5 years ago. It's a total difference, Tim. Before we let you go, as Tim Brando joins us, this is one of the more interesting years for the Heisman Trophy presentation. Who wins it?
Gosh, I as a voter, I'm not ready. I have no clue right now. The three that I'm going to put down. It'll be after, obviously, the games played on Saturday. I'm calling the Big 12 championship on Fox with Spencer Tillman and Bruce Feldman at 12:30 from Norman, and then I'll watch all the other games. I don't know. I'm not sure that I can pull the lever for Lamar Jackson with these losses that Louisville's taken. Now, I think he'll probably win. And I think he'll probably win because he's going to be on every ballot, even with the losses and even with, I thought, a pretty pedestrian at best performance in that last game. He did so much when the lights were on in those big game situations that it really helps him. Even in the loss that they had earlier this year to Clemson, he was having Heisman moments left and right. So my guess is he'll be the first Heisman winner that we've had in a while that wins on the power of the second and third place votes that he'll get across the country. There's no denying bias in the Heisman voting. Even the Heisman Trust understands that's going to happen. It's regional voting always takes place, and they're aware of that. But it's very rare that you have a guy that transcends all those time zones, and he's one of those guys. I don't know that I can vote him one. If I see out of Deshaun Watson, or if I see out of Jalen Hurts from Alabama a dominant performance, Hurts is doing something that hasn't been done in college football. You can argue he doesn't pass it as well as he runs it, but he's a true freshman. And not since Jamel Holloway, who replaced Troy Aikman early in 1985, have we seen a quarterback go wire to wire as a true freshman, number one in the country. That's heady stuff when you think about it. He'll have to improve his passing game in the championship game with Florida to get my vote. But, certainly you got to think about him. He's got to be there. And there are other candidates. Deontay Foreman has got to be the best running back on a poor team that we've seen maybe since Paul Hornung won it in 1956 for Notre Dame. Foreman's just been off the charts, Derrick Henry-esque. But unfortunately, he plays with a team that had a losing record and is going nowhere and fired its coach. So, Zach, I've got no clue. I've
it's
given
crazy.
You a few names.
It really is. It's crazy. 'Cause you're right.
Crazy.
You can't go Louisville. You just can't.
It's hard for me to pull the lever for a guy who couldn't win the biggest of games that he had to have
No
at
question.
that position. But at the same time, while not divulging whether I'm going to vote for him or what position I'm going to vote him in, I'll predict to you that he does ultimately win because he's going to be on every ballot.
Yeah, a lot of early votes, too. Tim Brando, thank you so much. Have a great call this weekend, and say hello to Spencer for me.
I'll do it, Zach. Many thanks.
Thanks so much. There's Tim Brando joining us from Fox Sports, 609-919-9200. This is the Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920 The Jersey. What we'll do right now is we'll take a quick break. Eagles fans, we addressed that at the beginning of the show. Don't worry, Mets fans, we'll do Cespedes talk as well. We got that today. That's what happens when you have some breaking news and a game you don't expect to go the way that you thought it would. So what we'll do right now is we'll take a quick break. When we come back on the other side, we got to take care of Ken Niumatulolo, who's going to be joining us next. Little Temple Navy talk next.